Listen to this podcast, or I'll gut you.
Welcome back, horror hounds, to a Friday the 13th special of Ghostman and Rivera's Horror Show podcast.
I'm Mike Ghostman Pickle, coming to you from Crystal Lake.
And I'm James Rivera, coming from you lost inside the poster of Friday the 13th Part 4, the final chapter. I'll make my way out of this poster by the time this podcast is over. And if you can't see what I'm talking about, watch the video version on YouTube, people.
Yeah. And we wanted to save our Friday the 13th, covering the whole franchise. We wanted to save that for another time. So this time, since it's Friday the 13th, we'll dive deep into three of them that we recently rewatched this week.
And I know last week we promised you an interview with Adam Marcus, the director of Jason Goes to Hell. Adam Marcus will be joining us next week. He's dealing with some family issues right now and just suffered a personal family tragedy. So I'm sending my best hopes, my wishes, my condolences to the family right now, and we'll see. You'll have him on next week.
Yeah, it felt so bad.
Yeah. Usually we like to kick off with horror show news, but we don't have news for you this time. But we do have something interesting to discuss, something that we wanted to let our audience know about before we jump into our Friday the 13th special.
Yeah, technically it is a bit of news. So Severin Films is releasing a brand new Plague Town. Plague Town is the one that was directed and co-written by Severin Films owner and creator David Gregory. I'm really excited about this one because, as you know, if you listen to the show, we interviewed David Gregory a while back, and I completely nerded out on Plague Town. And it's a movie that I love, that gets better each time I watch it, and I show it to all my friends every time they come over. So I'm really excited that they decided to release another Blu-ray, special Blu-ray for their Black Friday sale. It's actually a part of their Black Friday sale this year. The bonus features on it, first of all, it's a region-free Blu-ray. And the bonus features...
for the uninitiated, that means that you could watch it anywhere in the world. A lot of Blu-rays, especially like Blu-ray players, are like region marked. So if something was made in North America, you can't watch it here and vice versa. So it's hard to get discs. A lot of people have to buy region-free Blu-ray players to watch stuff from around the world. Looks like this will be playable no matter where you live.
Yeah, and as far as I'm concerned, this is a very special movie. It's one of my personal favorites of the last 20 years. But the bonus features on this disc include 2009 audio commentary and also an audio commentary with director David Gregory and producer Derek Curl. You have to hear this guy. The producer Derek Curl is a trip. It also has a visit to Plague Town behind the scenes featurette, the sounds of Plague Town, where it talks about the score and the sound design, and also a trailer and two short films, Scathed and Till Death from David Gregory. And also the limited Black Friday edition includes an exclusive slipcase and the first ever release of the film's original motion picture soundtrack on CD. But the most excited I am about any of the special features is the White Lace and Button Eyes, the making of Plague Town. It's a brand new behind-the-scenes documentary by documentary filmmaker Howard S. Berger, and it's in-depth interviews with David Gregory, and it talks about how David Gregory and the producers got the rights back from NPI / also known as Dark Sky Films. And I didn't know this, but Plague Town was actually the first film from Dark Sky Films after they did the Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer movies. So this is the first original movie that they got after those movies to try to start their company up. And personally, I think they misunderstood this movie and mistreated it and the filmmakers, as far as I'm concerned, especially after watching this documentary. There's also an in-depth interviews with John Cregan, who's the co-writer and editor, and also Tate Steinseek, the makeup artist that was on the sci-fi makeup show Face Off, and also Derek Curl, the one I told you about, the producer. The guy's a trip. And there's several video diaries from the set that give you an intimate look into what was going on during production. They go through everything from their location scouting when they found the location, the makeup and the designs. They interviewed most of the cast. The women from the cast look absolutely beautiful now. They went through all the casting, all the rehearsals. They go through the process of the kids and the parents on set when they talk about the parents being such troopers as they filmed into the night, sometimes 4 or 5 in the morning or till the sun came up. They go through all the costume design and props, how difficult the DP was, and then they get to post-production, which is where the real nightmare starts. They got, I won't go into it too much, you have to watch the documentary, but they go into the nightmares they had with Dark Sky Films because they just did not understand what a rough cut was. So they seen the rough cut and they kept that rough cut in their heads throughout several subsequent cuts and trying to please them. And they just never treated it right, never gave it a proper release, never believed in it at all. Just put David Gregory through a nightmare. So to where after watching this documentary, I see why David Gregory didn't do a whole lot of original feature films after that.
And if anybody in the audience is interested in David Gregory, he's been running Severin Films for a while. We actually did a podcast with David Gregory a couple months ago, just titled David Gregory, the Horror Show Interview. He gives you his own little insight into the making of this movie, Plague Town, as well as his work on several fantastic documentaries revolving around the horror genre. So check it out if you haven't heard that podcast yet.
Yeah, and some of the stories in this documentary he tells on the podcast when we interviewed him, but they go into even deeper depth on the documentary, and it was probably one of the most fascinating behind-the-scenes documentaries I've seen because it captures so perfectly the trials and tribulations of an indie, low-budget horror production. And it from everything from the problems with the makeup designs, like he got the guy Tate Steinseck from the Face Off competition, but he had never been the head of a makeup department on a feature film before. So he was way over his head and had a lot of problems with the director starting out because he just wasn't getting what David wanted. But it ended up great in the end. And it's just a fascinating portrayal of what it's like to try to work magic on such a low budget. I loved it.
Yep, it's definitely worth checking out, and I'll be copying that Blu-ray myself as soon as it's available.
So if any of our fans are into indie horror filmmaking or just indie horror films in general, watch this movie. It's a true gem, and it becomes even more fascinating as you watch these behind-the-scenes documentaries, which David Gregory is very good at making.
Yes. So we are going to jump into the matter at hand. We will be reviewing 3 Friday the 13th films, 3 choice ones.
Yeah, we kind of went through the span of the franchise and kind of cherry picked ones that kind of spread out, starting with Friday the 13th, the final chapter from 1984. This one's directed by Joseph Zito, who also directed The Prowler a few years before that. And this one picks up where 3 left off. Jason is taken to a morgue where he comes back to life and starts killing his way to Camp Crystal Lake, where a family and a group of teens are both staying in separate cabins. The standouts in this one are, of course, Crispin Glover and Corey Feldman as Tommy Jarvis. And as we know, Tommy Jarvis is a character that keeps recurring throughout the franchise. And Ted White plays Jason. He was an actor and a stuntman who did not like horror films, and this is one of the reasons why he's not credited as Jason in this movie. So he did not like horror films, especially slashers, and he kept butting the heads with the director over his treatment of the actors. So that's why he's not credited. But he's in my opinion one of the best Jasons. And then of course the great Tom Savini did the makeup.
For me, this is probably the ultimate Friday the 13th film, because my thing with this franchise is that unlike what makes a lot of franchises special or classic is because they started off with a great film that's generally regarded as a masterpiece, whether it be Halloween or A Nightmare on Elm Street or the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Within the horror genre, those are some of the biggest giants. Friday the 13th, on the other hand, the series was basically a ripoff of Halloween. And they're pretty upfront about what they were trying to do. So what's the next best bad luck holiday after Halloween? Friday the 13th. So it started off as kind of a gimmick. Something interesting happened with Friday the 13th. Even though it probably had the weakest first film of any of the major franchises, as it went along, it pushed itself so far that they started becoming better and better as they go along. So this is one of those rare franchises, in my opinion, where the middle section is actually better. The middle and the later entries are actually better than the early entries. And I think this is the one where they really start to hit their groove in terms of what a Friday the 13th film is and how good they can actually be. I felt that they were kind of tiptoeing towards that with Part 3, though that one has so many hokey elements because of the 3D element and how much they shove weird shit, most mundane shit into the camera that's not very exciting, just to let you know that you're watching 3D. I think a lot of it had to do with the director behind this one, Joseph Zito, who also did, as you mentioned earlier, The Prowler. Any slasher fans out there, please go check out The Prowler, one of the best slasher films. Tom Savini also did the special effects on that, which is why he's back to work on this. Is brutal, it's sadistic, you got to check it out. This movie has some of the elements of The Prowler, some of the character details, the acting, and it has great kills, although it's not as sadistic as something as the Prowler, and the MPA did take their scissors and cut. Despite the fact that these are kind of like bifurcated kills, I think they're still really effective. They really get Tom Savini's work done well. And it's the first one for me where all of the teenagers seemed like real people. I didn't be clear. I thought some of the characters were annoying, and I didn't like everybody in this movie, but they felt like people I knew in my life. Would you agree with me, Michael?
Oh, yeah. I mean, every character, even down to the smallest bit parts, everyone feels real. Everyone who comes on the screen, it feels real. Now, yes, just like many of the other entries, some of the characters were fairly unused and kind of wasted and just there to be victims, but even they felt real.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought it was, they perfected the formula on this one, and then it so much so that some of the others pale in comparison. Like I went ahead and watched 3 this week because I knew it was leading up to this one. I wanted to see the contrast of how good it was, and it was just, it done everything that 3 done but better.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it was funny. It's actually touching at times. It's sexy. It's quirky. Has great kills. And it really sticks in your mind after watching it. Like it, no matter how many times when you rewatch it, no matter how many times you or how long you wait between viewings, it just seems like you're just waiting for every scene that comes up, because every one scene right after another is something memorable that sticks with you.
I think that there's 2 actors that also elevate this movie, and you mentioned them earlier, and they're Crispin Glover and little Corey Feldman. Always nice to see Corey Feldman as a young kid. Crispin Glover is, I'd say he's probably a little bit more famous for being an eccentric person than he is being an actor per se. And this movie takes full advantage of his awkward personality, his strange quirks, and everything that comes along with Crispin, so much so that the character kind of feels like Crispin Glover, and I think that's why the character works, because he feels like a weird person. He's awkward as hell. He's pretty goofy, and he's kind of likable. For all that you find him goofy, you kind of want him to succeed. You want him. He's kind of an endearing character, and you can't forget the name Dead Fuck, as this movie drops that word 30 fucking times, and it's irritating every time it comes up.
Yeah.
I hate that damn word, and it's annoying. Overused, but of course you cannot forget Crispin Glover's dance moves in this. It's one of the highlights of the movie. It has nothing to do with the horror. It's interesting is when Crispin Glover starts doing his awkward dance and it's all over the place, that was all Crispin Glover. That did not come from the director. That was all him, and apparently that's how he used to actually dance in nightclubs at the time. So I found that kind of interesting. It's little things like that where the actors were allowed to bring a bit of their own personality to the parts, instead of this just being shrill, mindless, droning teens with shitty dialogue. We get people who feel real. And then Corey Feldman, who's one of the major child actors of the 1980s, does a really good job right here. He's sweet, he's endearing, and that's another thing that this movie gets right. It's not just about teenagers. It takes the time to go through Tommy Jarvis's little family, and it's kind of cute, it's adorable, and it's actually really, really sweet and endearing. So as you have the horny teenagers next door that are lined up being killed, and then you have a loving family next door right towards them, and you have Jason going back and forth between these two different groups of people, and it makes for a really interesting dynamic. Tommy Jarvis's character, now this is just my speculation, I'm guessing he's named after Tom Savini, who did the special effects on it, because Tommy Jarvis is into special effects. He's into creating monsters. You see all the stuff that he has in his room. He's even the one who uses his knowledge of makeup and things to kind of outsmart Jason at the end and get the better of him. So I'm pretty sure that character must have been some kind of tribute to Tom Savini.
Yeah, and those masks and stuff that he made were badass for a little kid, dude. I was like, damn, this
We're actually Tom Savini's
genius. Yeah.
Those are actually Tom Savini's masks that he brought from the studio. And one of the interesting things is that Tom Savini didn't actually want to do any more Friday the 13th films after the original, because he did the effects. He did a fantastic job on the effects in the original. He always felt that it was stupid that they brought Jason back as a character in part 2 and had him killing people. So he actually turned down Friday the 13th part 2 to work on the Superior, the Burning. But the reason he came back to this one is he had a relationship with Joseph Zito after doing great work with him on The Prowler. And because this was billed as the final chapter, Savini said that he felt a personal responsibility. Since he brought Jason into the world, he had to take them out. And of course, there were 8 movies after this, so it's never really the final chapter. But I think Tom Savini's makeup work is one of the things that makes this movie special. It has some of the best looking kills in the series, some of those imaginative kills. And granted, the camera cuts away a little bit faster than you might like it to. I think it gets the job done all the same, and I think it's enough so that you could just admire the work that he's doing. And I like that since the MPAA was so hard on them with killing the teenagers and whatnot, they actually let them go a little bit more overboard when they killed Jason. That's why the end scene, the slaughter with Jason, is more detailed, it's goopier, it lasts longer, the camera doesn't cut away. Apparently the MPAA has no problem when you're doing harm to the monster.
Yeah, and there was 14 kills in this one. That includes Jason's awesome machete to the head, where it's buried all the way into his skull, and then he kind of falls down on the ground, and it buries all the way back into the back of his head. That was awesome. And the unsung kill, Crispin Glover's corkscrew kill, where it's not only a great kill, but you're kind of feeling good for the guy, because he finally scored, and after being so worried about being a dead fuck through the whole thing, then he finally scores and he's feeling good about it, and then he gets the corkscrew through the hand.
Where's the corkscrew?
Yeah.
Love the reading of
There's
that.
the cork. Jason found it for you.
As soon as he asks where the corkscrew is, boom, the corkscrew goes right through his hand and fucks him up. But yeah, it's so weird, but this is where, for me, the final chapter is where these movies started to really fall into their groove, and they started to figure out what Jason is and who he is as a character.
Yeah, and some of the other kills included stuff like the throat slit and the head turned completely around, the torso split open, the spear through the crotch, and then a spear through the back, and then there's a meat cleaver to the face, and a head crushing, and an axe to the chest. And all of it together, just the whole movie in itself is just over the top, just enough to make it fun, but it's never cheap.
No, not at all. Not at all. Not at all. What was I going to say? Friday the 13th, the final chapter. And, this real quick. One other thing I wanted to mention about you said who played Jason is a guy named Ted White. He was not as good as Kane Hodder was in the next entry, in the later entries. But something interesting about him, he actually was the stuntman in The Creature from the Black Lagoon from 1954. So I always found that really interesting that he kind of stretches, whether even not he likes horror, he kind of stretches right across horror history. And he also was a stunt double for Clark Gable and John Wayne. So he had quite a career before doing this movie. Always interesting to see people from old Hollywood getting involved with these cheap little slasher movies.
Yeah, and I think he was almost 60 when he played Jason. So I think he's the oldest out of all the actors who played Jason.
I think it kind of shows in this one. You could even tell a little bit in the parts where Jason is running, but I think it works just fine because Jason is this giant zombie character to begin with, so we kind of already expect something that ridiculous. But yeah, this is one. It's just like for if you're a fan of the slasher movies and the slasher movie formula, this is probably one of the standouts of 1980 slashers. It gets everything you like about the formula right, and it does it with more likable characters, more interesting kills, and more attention paid to atmosphere than anything. I also really like the opening sequence at the hospital with the perverted coroner who's going through the bodies. Really obnoxious and disgusting character, but for some reason it kind of gets you, I don't know, involved in the movie because he seems kind of real. So when he gets his comeuppance, it's a little bit satisfying.
And that part kind of reminded me of a Halloween 2 because it's in a hospital as well. But I think it's so much more effective.
Yeah. See, if Halloween 2 could have done more of what they were doing at the beginning of Friday the 13th Part 4, they might have been a better movie.
Yeah. So the next one we watched this week was toward the end of the 80s, Friday the 13th Part 7, The New Blood. This was the first one with Kane Hodder. And this was directed by John Carl Buechler. And this one is Jason is chained to the bottom of Crystal Lake from Part 6. So a young girl named Tina accidentally kills her abusive father with telekinetic powers on Crystal Lake. Then she returns with her mother and her doctor years later and accidentally releases him. People always accidentally releasing Jason.
It's always the case. So at this point, we're at Part 7 of the franchise, and I've heard a lot of people complain about having a girl with telekinesis and basically being a Carrie ripoff. But let's face it, when you're in the 7th film about a giant mutant zombie who just comes back for the purpose of slaughtering camp counselors and horny teenagers, you gotta mix up the formula and put something else like in it to get a fresh spin. And I think this movie did just that, to keep keep the formula fresh and keep it going. And I actually like the storyline revolving around the young girl with telekinetic powers and her sadistic doctor who's kind of using it for his own benefit.
Yeah, and that sadistic doctor kind of reminded me of the doctor from Halloween 2018.
Yes.
Like a cross between him and Loomis because the way his therapy with this young girl is berating her and yelling at her.
And the actor is Terry Kaiser. He plays Dr. Cruz in this one. And the lead actress is Tina Shepard. Tina Shepard plays the young girl who is actually the lead character is Tina Shepard. The actress is Lar Park Lincoln.
Yeah, and then the special effects are a standout in this one, I felt as well. It's David Fletcher, who also did Nightmare on Elm Street 4, Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing. He did Free Jack. He did California with Brad Pitt, Waterworld, Face Off with Nicolas Cage and John Travolta, the House of Wax remake, The Ruins, and then currently he's doing the makeup effects for Watchmen, the TV series.
Oh, I wasn't even aware that he had such a career. That's one of the only things about this movie is I also think this is among the best Friday the 13th films, especially because it kind of adds something that spices up the formula. But my one complaint is if you're a Friday the 13th fan, I'd highly recommend you get this new box set, the Friday the 13th collection. It's awesome. One of the things that I found most revealing about watching the special features for Part 7, The New Blood, is how elaborate the special and gore effects were before the MPAA took scissors to it. And I think this has more of an impact on this movie than it did on Part 4. For example, there's a scene in this one where somebody gets their head crushed in. In the movie, you barely see any of it, and it's kind of just suggested. We see some damaged footage from behind the scenes that the original thing was the act that Kane Hodder was going to crush the guy's head, but it pushed his head all the way down to the size of a walnut. And you see all kinds of fantastic gore makeup splurting and coming out right like that. And they had to cut it out because of the MPAA. Now, the infamous bag scene, the infamous sleeping bag scene where Kane Hodder grabs the grabs the teenager and just slams her against the tree. It's not as effective as its reputation suggests. The way that people talk about that kill scene. However, they originally shot a scene where Kane Hodder keeps banging the sleeping bag up against a tree over and over until it's just oozing with blood and gore, and it looked absolutely fantastic. So there's so many things that the lame soccer moms at the MPAA took the scissors to this movie and really fucked it up. Now, I really do think that the special effects that are there that survive do really well, but it does bother me how much the censors really had their way with this movie. And it makes me sad that the footage wasn't preserved well enough to do an unrated version all these years later.
Yeah, and it's one of the most heavily censored by the MPAA. I mean, they just butchered it, and by this time they were sick of the series, MPAA, you know, because they were sick of how much they got away with. So they really wanted to skewer them and make sure that they didn't get too many graphic things past them.
If you notice with the series, the earlier entries are a lot more graphic. The MPAA was softer on the first few entries, and you could tell the longer the series went on, it was probably starting to piss them off. So this was their way of like shoving it in their face.
And I have a feeling that it's because of Kane Hodder as well, because he makes these kills look so much more brutal. Like he seems pissed off and annoyed. Mm-hmm. And then I hear that the sleeping bag kill looks so brutal because Kane Hodder was having trouble with the prop, because they put the weights they put inside the sleeping bag were too heavy, so he wasn't getting a good swing. So he got so pissed off that he actually ended up using all of his strength to just swing it, and then when he finally finished swinging it as much as he could, it hit the ground and he kicked it. Yeah. He was so pissed off. But Kane Hodder as Jason is so menacing in this, and you see that even the some of the weaker entries after this really benefit from having Kane Hodder as Jason, especially in this one because of the stunts. Holy shit! This is the first time you really see Jason being put through the ringer, because Kane Hodder puts himself in danger again and again. I think that's why he got this role, because he was so willing to put himself in danger for the sake of the movie, because he cares so much about doing it right and getting the best, most effective take. And even like he falls through a stairway, which looks really painful in this movie. This big man completely falling through a stairwell, and then when the porch roof collapses on his head, I cannot believe that shit was real. They really collapsed the roof of a porch on top of Kane Hodder's head. And also when he burns in this, he burns for 40 seconds straight and had like bad burn scars on his neck and on his chest from it.
Yeah, the dedication right here is kind of unprecedented, and I think there's a reason that Kane Hodder gets so much love. I liked some of the earlier Jasons, but this is by far the most physically intimidating version of that character, and it shows that acting goes deeper than just facial expressions and vocals. There's a physicality, especially with characters like this, and it actually does matter who is behind the mask in terms of how menacing they are. One of the details that I really like that Kane Hodder does that no previous Jason did, when he stands there, he has this thing where fucking huge chest keeps going, it keeps going in and out. You see his chest and you see every breath rise, and it seems like somebody taking breaths who's very angry or pissed off. He's hulkier looking, he's more menacing, and when he does the kills, you see more force put into them. For example, when there's a scene where he drags, I forgot what it was, like some kind of pipe and shoves it right through somebody's head. Most Jasons would just pick it up and just shove it through, but you see him go pull his arm back just enough to get the right amount of force that would be realistic for somebody to shove something that hard and push it. It's these little details like that bring so much more to the character of Jason. It's this intimidating physicality that I don't think his predecessors had.
And he knows how to move to get the camera to pick up on it. Like most people go through the action of the stunts, but they forget to realize that they really have to move their limbs in a big way in order to get the camera to really pick up on it and really look brutal. So when he moves everything. He moves his whole body, and his whole body is acting through the thing. But overall, I thought the movie had a really good story, but the characters were less interesting and less real than some of the other ones, like part 4 and part 6. But and meanders with the characters a little bit that I didn't like that much. But I like the doctor. I like the main character. And it was another cabin full of cliched teens that are throwing the birthday party. Like, it's complete with a perky teen girl, a science fiction writer, a shy girl, a socialite, blah blah blah. But and all the kinetic stuff, all the telekinetic stuff and especially the battle with Jason goes a little campy, but it's still a lot of fun. And then I thought it was a little hokey when the girl summons the spirit of her father to defeat Jason. That was a little hokey, but okay.
It's a questionable choice for sure, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I think this movie is admirable because it kind of deals with the main character, Tina. It deals with her trauma, because this is not a spoiler because this is revealed like right at the beginning of the movie. Her father, her backstory is when she was a little girl, her father used to be very abusive with her mother, so she kind of eventually had enough of it and lashed out at her dad and had a Carrie-esque moment where she basically killed her father and collapsed him into the lake. And I think it's interesting for the 7th movie in a slasher franchise to try to, I don't know, tackle the lingering trauma from childhood that follows you all the way into adulthood. I thought that was pretty admirable for the 7th film in a franchise like this.
Yeah. And they did not skimp on the kills either, where they went even higher on the kill count, which is 16 kills in this one. And those kills include drowning, stabbing, tent spike to the back was an awesome one, axe to the face, stabbed with a scythe, head crushing. But the 2 best were the party horn through the eye. Awesome. I always love stuff that has to do with the eye, especially fucking party horn, dude. But the sleeping bag death has to be the best in this one, and arguably one of the best of the franchise. And there's a cool little story that I found out from behind the scenes, where Kane Hodder's dressing room was about a quarter mile down the road from where they were filming. So one night it was late at night, he decided to walk back by himself in full costume. So this guy stopped and asked him, "Oh, are you with the movie?" And Kane Hodder got annoyed because it's such a stupid question. Of course I'm with the movie. So he got so annoyed that the guy asked him if he was from the movie, that he just stood there and stared at him. So the guy went and called the cops.
He got scared?
Yeah, and the cops said that they were going to come to set, but they never did.
Interesting.
But when we were saying that this is one of the most edited, one of the most butchered from the MPAA, it was actually sent to the MPAA 5 times, where they had to keep cutting it to keep it from being an X rating. And unfortunately, there's no hope for an uncut version because Paramount destroyed all the outtakes, which sucks.
You get to see small bits of the outtakes if you watch the special features, and you could tell what they were going for. Bear in mind, it's really shoddy footage that looks old, unpreserved, and you could tell that they did not take care of it. I think it is an absolute fucking tragedy that we will never see an unrated version of this film, because I bet you it would kick so much ass. As it is, this is already one of the stronger, more involving films in the Friday the 13th franchise, has the most intimidating Jason, but it's that little X factor that it's missing that puts it a notch below part 4, for me anyway. As much as I enjoyed this, as much as I had a great time with it, it's something that's holding it back, and it's the fucking MPAA.
Yeah. And did you feel yourself wishing that Kane Hodder was in some of the others, like especially part 3? Mm-hmm. If he would have been in part 3, that would have been such a much stronger film.
Yeah, I wished he was in Freddy vs. Jason. I wish they would have kept him. I wish they would have kept him beyond Jason X, because even in the ones I don't like him, my least favorite Friday the 13th movie, full disclosure, is actually Jason Takes Manhattan. I think that movie is absolutely awful. It feels like it was marketed for children, and the way that it plays out. And its title is a cheat. That's not even accurate. Besides the point, Kane Hodder kicks ass in the role, and he kind of elevates the movie. So we could definitely use more Kane Hodder as Jason.
Yeah, there's a reason why Kane Hodder has become so synonymous with Jason, even though he was only in a handful of movies.
And it's weird that he could become so synonymous, to come in so late to a franchise, to come in at number 7, and then to be able to call yourself the definitive Jason. That's pretty damn impressive, if you ask me.
Oh yeah, the strongest films of the franchise had already happened before he came.
Yep, I agree with that. I agree with that. But this
And,
is one of the top 3 or top 4 Friday the 13th films for me.
The next one we're going to discuss became one of my favorites after watching it. Now, I just watched it this week. I can't believe I waited so long to watch it because I heard it was so bad. Jason X from 2001.
Yes.
This gets so much shit, and I do not see why. It's one of the best as far as I'm concerned. It's directed by James Isaac, who also directed Skinwalkers and Pig Hunt. So not great movies, but this is by far his best one. But I can tell that director James Isaac also did special effects for Return of the Jedi, Gremlins, House 2, Look Who's Talking To, Existenz, and Virtuosity with Denzel Washington. So it's really a special effects guy hired to be a director on this one. And you can tell because the special effects are great. And it's written by Todd Farmer, who wrote The Messengers and My Bloody Valentine from 2009 and Drive Angry. So not a great
resume.
Yeah, not a great script here. But the makeup artist and special effects artist was Stephen Dupuis, who did Scanners, Amityville 2, RoboCop, Poltergeist 3, which is one of my favorites, The Fly 2, Cape Fear, Mrs. Doubtfire, A History of Violence, I Am Legend, the TV series Preacher, Venom, and he's currently working on Matrix 4. So that gives you an idea of what the makeup effects and special effects are like in this film. But this one's about Jason is cryogenically frozen in 2008. Then centuries later, in the year 2455, the Earth is inhabitable and humans inhabit another planet called Earth 2. A team of students, of course, accidentally awaken Jason and the scientist Rowan, and Jason starts killing the students and crew, especially after he is transformed into a part metal, indestructible killing machine. Called Uber Jason.
Uber Jason. So here's my thing with this. I think I understand where the criticism comes from. And first off, it's the 10th film in a slasher franchise, and it's taking Jason to space. Now, on the surface, that sounds really stupid. And don't get me wrong, it is actually very stupid. It's very, very ridiculous. However, I think it works. And one of the reasons is Jason is not like Michael Myers. He's not like Leprechaun, who went into space, which is pretty stupid. But, like, for example, somebody like Michael Myers, you would never be able to do a film taking him into space and expect the audience or fans to buy it or eat it up. It'll never work. You couldn't do it with Chucky. You couldn't do it with Freddy. You couldn't do it with pretty much any of the major horror movie monsters. Jason is different, though. Jason is the one horror icon that you could take into space and he could survive it. Not only could you take it into space, but because the franchise itself is kind of defined by how ridiculous it is and how far it pushes itself past its expiration date. And one of the best things about it is the franchise still finds new ways to entertain on the 8th, 9th, and 10th film when this series should have been dead by this point. So I think that in and itself is an achievement. But because Jason is so ridiculous, he can go to space. It makes sense. When you hear that Jason's in space, it sounds ridiculous for a second. You pause and you're like, yeah, of course he is. He's Jason Voorhees. He can go anywhere and he could survive it. And I think the filmmakers, what makes this one good for me is the filmmakers recognize the inherently silly premise and why what they're doing is kind of dumb. And they embrace it wholeheartedly. You could tell that they know that this isn't serious. They know what they're doing. And you get a sense that they were kind of giddy on set, seeing how much fun they could have taking this to the most extremes. Let's build a killer sex robot to come out and fight Jason in one of the most absurd scenes in a Friday the 13th franchise. It's kind of awesome, the scene where one of the characters has a sex robot who's upgraded to this, like, badass.
Yeah.
He's just kicking Jason's ass and shooting him. It's absolutely hysterical. Great time. And this movie has some good kills, too. I mean, the infamous frozen head that gets slammed down is great. I like the way that Jason looks later in the movie. They really take advantage of the freedom afforded by the premise because it's 400 years in the future. Technology is so much different. The virtual reality games that they played, one of the best parts of the movie is when the characters are playing like this virtual reality game where they're shooting monsters, and Jason comes and joins in the game, and they get killed in the game, and then they turn the game off, and Jason comes up and kills them in real life. It's a lot of inventive stuff like that that really makes this one work for me.
And of course, Kane Hodder stands out as Jason. All the kills are high impact. He makes the campy parts of it a little more entertaining. And everything that's campy about this film is campy on purpose, and you can tell it's done on purpose. So besides Kane Hodder, the stands out in this are Lisa Ryder, who plays the android KM-14, and also Lexa Doig, who played Rowan. And the rest of the characters for me are fun but a little interchangeable, except for the cameo by the great David Cronenberg, because he agreed to be in this because the director had let him borrow his crew for another movie, so he paid him back by being in this movie. But he said, "I'll only be in this movie if I get to be killed on screen." So.
And let's be honest, how can you hate on a movie where David Cronenberg gets impaled within the first 15 minutes of I mean, it seems only fitting that the king of body horror would get his own gruesome death by Jason. So that's just another thing that just elevates this, is the presence of David Cronenberg, which sounds pretty silly.
And what's funny to me was Part 7 was one of the most heavily censored out of all the Friday the 13th films, but Jason X was one of the least censored. They literally only had like a few seconds taken out of the original cut. So it's exactly the way it was supposed to, with the way the director meant it to be. But as you said, I love the use of the virtual worlds to fool Jason. And when he kind of, the jig is up and he figures out what they're doing, it's all really cool. I love that awesome
scenes where they take him back to Camp Crystal Lake.
Yeah.
He meets the girls in the sleeping bags.
Yeah.
And I totally plays up the tropes of the fright. Like, the movie basically acknowledges the central premise and how ridiculous it is when those naked girls get out of the sleeping bags and they're like, oh my gosh, we love premarital sex. We love premarital sex and doing drugs, knowing that Jason's going to go after that. I think it's funny that they actually called out that aspect of the series.
Yeah. And that the battle with the android, I was nerding out on the whole thing. It was so, I like cheesy when it's deliberately cheesy, when the filmmakers are in on the joke and you can tell they are. That's when it's really fun for me. But this one really ramped up the kill count, which is 24 kills in this one, and thousands more if you count where he causes one ship to crash into another. And I hear that something like 20,000 people were on that.
We're supposed to
ship that crashed. But it's 24 kills involving head bashing. He chokes and shoots someone. He chokes someone with a chain, impales them through the back. He throws somebody through a door, and all of this, the first few kills that I talked about, all that's in the first 6 minutes of the film. And then later on, about 30 minutes in, is when you get my favorite kill and another one of the best of the franchise, the frozen face, and she's smashed into her face is smashed apart. And from what I hear, I haven't seen it, but they did this. They analyzed this kill on MythBusters, and they figured out that that's not actually the way things would have happened. But oh well. But the other kills involve stabbing, back breaking, head crushing, neck snapping. Someone is cut in half. Several characters are impaled. And then the virtual girls that are in Crystal Lake, he smashes their heads together. That was awesome. And then of course, the huge death count when Jason causes one ship to crash into another. And this is actually, people consider it a failure, but it's actually one of the most successful entries of the franchise when you include the DVD and post-theater sales, which were through the roof on this one.
Yeah, I remember that box office for this movie was not as great as they thought it would be, but it was actually a hit when it was at Blockbuster and it was a rental. And I remember as a kid seeing this movie everywhere and everybody renting it as a kid. So they definitely made their profit back through sales. And I feel like it's kind of it's taken on more of a cult reputation, as it was bound to. It's Jason in space, part of the Friday the 13th franchise. And I like it a lot. takes it in a lot of new directions. The spirit of it is genuinely fun, and it's hard for me not to be entertained by what I see. And here's another thing: I find it really interesting that people think that this is like a dumb entry or anything. Like, they're all kind of dumb when you stop and you think about it. And I don't mean that as a criticism. I love this franchise; it's a blast. They're all kind of dumb. So why
Even the best ones are dumb.
Huh?
Even the best ones are dumb.
Yeah, the best one. And I think even the people know when they're making this movie, they know what it is. They're cheap movies. They have the same formula over and over. That's kind of their charm, though. That's kind of what makes it special. It's that there's kind of a scrappiness to this series. There's a certain type of charm and a kind of energy that you get watching the franchise, watching each film, and watching the franchise progress. It's kind of a fun experience. So I think this movie is kind of the natural culmination. I mean, he'd already gone to hell, which is ridiculous. He did battle with Carrie. He's been resurrected so many times. Next up, he's going to fight Freddy Krueger. Jason is the character, that horror character, that you can put him in any ridiculous situation and it's going to work, and he's going to thrive no matter how absurd the surroundings are.
And Jason X, for me, had everything that I love about the franchise. It was just set in space. I mean, it had the same basic formula. Somebody always has to accidentally awaken Jason, and he starts killing everybody. So it was cool to see that same formula just in space. I really dug it.
And like you said, this has some of the most graphic scenes in this. And one of the reasons is that you notice a trend with the MPA. In the early 80s, when these things were coming out, the MPA was much more loose. Hence why if you go back and watch Friday the 13th, the first one, that was probably the most graphic one for the longest time. The way that the neck slits and the way that the spears go through people, like that scene where Kevin Bacon gets a spear through him from underneath the bed. Yeah. And that scene, the camera lingers on it for a long time as you see Kevin Bacon like struggling to breathe and the blood come out. I can't imagine in the later series the MPA letting them get away with that. They would have made that scene cut shorter and they would not have lingered on it quite as long. So you see that in the beginning they were kind of soft, and then they kind of got pissed and they were just kind of being harsh on these movies. But by the time this one came out, that shit was old hat, and you know what I mean? By the time we roll around to the early 2000s, we'd seen everything, so they started to loosen back up and let them get away with the stuff like they were doing at the beginning of the franchise. It's just unfortunate that this franchise suffers from that. And what makes that even more interesting to me is that the whole appeal of the Friday the 13th films in the 80s were like, those are that dirties movies. Those are those bad movies that you shouldn't be watching. They're sexual, they're nasty, they're filled with graphic violence, and they have this type of reputation. They're like, ooh, the kids were at the time were like, I gotta see this because we're not supposed to watch it. And then when you watch the actual movies, they're not really nearly as bad as their reputation suggests. I've seen much more brutal slasher movies than what we see in the Friday the 13th franchise. Check out Blood Rage, check out The Burning or The Prowler or something like that if you want to see some really sadistic kills. But I feel like some of Friday the 13th's reputation is almost unearned in a certain way.
Yeah, because it reached such a high profile because of its runaway success. So it really got the attention of MPAA, where a lot of other more graphic horror films kind of slipped under their radar because they were so small.
Yeah, like I look back at like the original cut of My Bloody Valentine or like The Prowler. Those movies make these movies look kind of like a softened up version. And like you said, it's probably mostly because it went so mainstream. The other ones didn't have the mainstream expectations, so I guess they let them get away with it because I feel not as many people were going to watch it.
Yeah, and plus with Jason X, it's such a campy premise to have him in space that they probably let some of the graphic kills slide because it's so fantastical and so part of another world, you know.
Mm-hmm. So these are 3 standouts from the Friday the 13th franchise.
And part of it must be, you know, the reason why I like Jason X so much is because I just assumed that it was really bad and really hard to watch all these years. So my expectations were really low. So that's one of the reasons why I enjoyed it. But I didn't just enjoy it. I liked it more than 2, 3, 5, 7, 8, and I liked it better than the remake.
So there's probably only a couple that you think are better than Jason X, or probably I'm guessing Part 4, and maybe like Jason Goes to Hell or something like that.
Yeah, four, 6, Jason Goes to Hell, and the first one.
Those are the ones that you like the most?
Yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah, we're gonna have to tackle this the whole franchise at some point, because this is all over the fucking place. It's an interesting thing to go through. I mean, if you haven't got the Shout Factory box set, I would recommend you snatch it up, because they are limited, and once they sell out, the prices are just going to get jacked up on eBay and on Amazon if you want to get a used copy, because a lot of people just buy these movies for the purpose of having a rare thing and letting the price go up more and more and more as time goes on and it becomes more valuable.
Yeah, and also check out Crystal Lake Memories, the documentary on the franchise. They dive really deep into it, and there's a lot of fascinating stories about everyone, even the bad ones.
Yeah. And tune in to us next week when we do an interview with director Adam Marcus to go over Jason Goes to Hell, Part 9, the final Friday. The second final Friday, by the way, the first one being Part 4.
Yeah, that's another one that a lot of fans hate that I love.
Yeah, I actually think that I'm going to go more into it, but Jason Goes to Hell is one of the most interesting entries in the franchise, because it doesn't repeat the formula that any of them do, and it adds a lot of mythology and backstory to behind Jason, and it kind of takes like a wonky like the lore of this movie is so all over the place. You could tell that they did not know what they were doing. The revivals for Jason most of the time don't make sense, and it's totally inconsistent. What Adam Marcus attempted to do with Jason Goes to Hell was take a timeline that had no consistent continuity and somehow kind of make it make sense.
Yeah.
Yep. So that's all we have for today, folks. Tune in to us next week. Check us out on Facebook, on social media, facebook.com/Pickles Horror Show. Check us out on Instagram @Pickles Horror Show. And of course, check us out. Our podcast is available on YouTube. We have it available on Apple Podcast, on Spotify, and on SoundCloud. We have a link in the description that is our flow page. If you go there, you will be able to access the podcast in any format that is most convenient to you.
Yeah, and also stay informed about all of our feature film projects coming up. We're working on 3 feature film projects right now. So our last one, Pay Up, hasn't even come out yet. It's still lingering around in the festival circuit. So before that's even coming out, we're already working on 3 more. So we got lots of cool stuff coming up for you guys.
Yep. Stay tuned, folks. Stay tuned. Until next week, happy Friday the 13th, and happy horror.